Welcome to the Grocery Wars, presented by Brand Square. I'm Phil Lempert, and over the next 30 minutes, what we'll be doing is taking an overview of looking at exactly what's going on in the grocery store, as well as online shopping, as well as with consumers. What I want to do is get started by showing you an advertisement from about 100 years ago. I know you can read it, but I love reading it. So it's a picture of a hog with a child's head on the body. It says, makes children and adults as fat as pigs. No cure, no pay, price 50 cents. Again, keep in mind the value of 50 cents 100 years ago. Rove's tasteless chill tonic on the market over 20 years, 1.5 million bottles sold last year. The question is, what's in the bottle? And this ad is indicative of how consumer trends change. And our job is to stay in front of those trends on a constant basis. Bottom line is sugar water. Why is it so important for us to be here today? First of all, to understand that consumer needs change and they evolve. In front of us, in the food world, it is moving more rapidly than ever before. The retail landscape is also changing. We're seeing smaller stores, more food service operations within supermarkets, and certainly less cashiers. And the whole idea of how social media, technology, and apps are creating a whole new world that, frankly, your brands, your retailers need to be involved in. We can't sit on this side and wait for this technology to take over. Just a few years ago, consumers saw ads like this. They're happy because they eat lard. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Times have changed. But also, this indicates why consumers are so confused, especially when it comes to health claims, especially when it comes to nutrition. Because for years, they've been ingrained with certain messages that we're finding, because nutrition is a relatively new science, that bottom line is things change. And we're not doing an adequate job of really letting consumers know why they've changed. And they're coming up with more questions. And unfortunately, the key factor for so many of them, and I'll talk more about this later, is going to a search engine, typing in a word, and reading what comes up. As we all know, about half of what comes up is true, and half of what comes up, who knows who put it up there. So it's really indicative that the brands go out of their way to communicate properly, especially as it relates to health and nutrition information. Now, if we take a look at the future, traditional grocery is in trouble. According to Willard Bishop, they're projecting that it's going to drop down to a 36.2% share, while other retail food formats continue to increase. I would recommend that we think of the traditional grocery store, that 50,000 square foot store that has about 40,000 SKUs in it, as a dinosaur. We're stuck with real estate, we're stuck with brick and mortar, and frankly, consumers, especially the millennial generation and Generation Z, didn't grow up in that world. They don't have the same bias towards a brick and mortar store, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a little while. But we've got to keep our eyes open, because the landscape of retail is changing dramatically. So what's the opportunity for supermarkets? Number one is having smaller stores. There's no question about it. As we see, Aldi, for example, with over 1,300 stores now coming into California as well, projecting that over the next few years they'll have over 4,000 stores. Lidl coming to the U.S. as well. This is forcing a lot of traditional retailers to rethink their footprint. And again, years ago, there were leases for 20, 30 years for supermarkets. My recommendation to retailers today, don't sign a lease for more than 5 years. The geography is going to change. The demographics are going to change. The psychology is going to change. And we need to be more nimble in this world. Now, for brands, keep in mind that as we reduce the size of the stores, we're going to go from 40,000 products to half of that. So what happens to that other half? Well, if you go to the olive oil section, for example, you're going to see about 100 different bottles of olive oil, all of which are pretty much the same. Same country of origin, same extra light, regular, and extra virgin. Maybe it's time to curate that. where consumers are really depending on the retailer to find the best 10 olive oils versus having 100 there. And certainly, we're seeing a lot more service. We're seeing registered dietitians in supermarket, more chefs, CIA-trained chefs, butchers, fishmongers, sommeliers. We're seeing more service being critical to the success of a traditional supermarket than ever before. Their goal is relatively simple: to become the center of their community and regroup what they've lost. Keep in mind, traditional supermarkets over the past 10 years have lost 15% market share, and it's gone to other channels of distribution. One of the biggest trends that we're looking at now is called the grocerant, this combination of a grocery store and a restaurant. Lunds & Byerly's Kitchen is a wonderful example of this. It's a small footprint store. It has an assortment of curated products. It has a cooking school, and it also has within the 17,000 square foot a 4,000 foot restaurant that has over 70 local beers in it. And frankly, it's become a destination for a lot of consumers. This is a picture of a bar, if you would, that was assembled in a Whole Foods. And we're seeing Whole Foods doing more of this, where they're serving beer, where they're serving wines, and they're serving food. This is the hot spot in Northern California now on Saturday and Sunday afternoons when there's games playing. Also, what's so interesting to me about this is this was built right in front of the dairy department, something that's been a no-no. And if you look at the top left picture, you can see off to the right, the dairy department, but the idea of blocking the dairy department was unheard of just a few years ago. Well, today the times and the consumers have changed. This is Hy-Vee's Market Grill. And again, Hy-Vee, fabulous retailer, building wonderful stores, and I believe they now have over 20 of these market grills that are actually attached to their stores, and it seats about 300 people, and it's a full menu with CIA-trained chefs serving. And in Chicago, this is Mariano's. Mariano's has won awards for their grocerant format, and frankly, this barbecue was named the best barbecue in Chicago. And Friday night, their oyster bars are the hot pickup places in Chicago. So just imagine how times have changed, where when you're going to look to meet someone, you go to a supermarket. This is the ShopRite in Morris Plains, New Jersey. And these are two pictures that are butt up against each other so you can get a sense of the layout. On the right is their oyster bar as well, very, very popular. And on the left-hand side, adjoining it, is their seafood department. So it's a natural tie-in. They also built a 4,000 square foot atrium where people can go and eat, in addition to the seating area that you see in the bottom right. And in addition to their oyster bar and their seafood, they've got an Italian restaurant, they've got salads, they have just about anything that you can imagine in probably an area that occupies about 30,000 square foot. Let's move to grocery delivery. Obviously, this is a very hot topic. People are thinking that this is the rule of thumb. Well, just remember a couple years ago, we were fascinated being able to go on Amazon or other sites and getting delivery in a day or two, just ordering online. Well, now we're looking for delivery immediately, and it's still in its infancy. We haven't gotten into driverless cars making deliveries yet, or drones. We're going to see a lot more excitement in this space. The question is what Google Express, Instacart, and Uber will do. Uber has become a powerhouse in food delivery, and for good reason. And also, whether or not this is going to really fast-track e-payment, which has been stalled for a while. If you look at Uber, for example, within 10 minutes, you can have over 100 different essentials that people are looking for from their supermarket. With Instacart, and this is our zip code here in Santa Monica, 90405, you have 6 different retailers that you can order from Instacart. While they just started out at Whole Foods, they've expanded greatly. In parts of Manhattan, again, they've got 4, 5, 6 different retailers to choose from. It's a model that's worth watching And frankly, from where we sit, Instacart is going to be one of the winners. Also, what's so interesting is that people are willing to pay a premium for same-day delivery, yet alone getting delivery in an hour, which is something that Instacart is touting. So as we see the millennial generation who's strapped for cash, and we see other people who are concerned about the price of food, take a look at how many people are willing to pay more for same-day delivery. When I wake up in the morning, every morning, what I say to myself is, what is the consumer thinking? And I'd like you to think of that as well. The reason is the consumer changes every day based on what the headlines are. Look at the political election that we're going through now. Just all kinds of impact is changing the way people buy foods, what foods they're buying, what they want to know about their foods. And again, it's evolving very quickly, more quickly than we've ever seen. A lot of the focus has been on baby boomers as it relates to food. But now there are as many millennials as baby boomers, and frankly, as the baby boomers get older, they're going to die. So we really need to refocus on that millennial generation. What are their needs as it relates to food and how they shop? The interesting thing about millennials, as I said before, they don't have a lot of money. They've got high college debt, low-paying jobs. Many of them are living at home. Many of them are thinking that they're not going to have kids because of the expense of it, but they're passionate about food. And what's so interesting about their passion about food, this is a segment that they've taken over, whether it be food raves or the growth of food trucks. They're now over 4,000 food trucks in the country. It's growing by leaps and bounds. A lot more activity to be seen in the whole food truck world as well. But for them, this is a category that they can own, that they bring something to the party very different than boomers or Gen Xers. It's all for them about having a connection, conversation, and forming a community around food. They wake up in the morning and frankly, with the feeling that you only live once. They never want to eat the same thing twice in their lifetime. They're more adventurous than any other generation when it comes to food. And they also want to know where their food comes from. Who's making their food? What's the sustainability aspect of the food? Just about everything, and those of you that are fans of Portlandia, I'm sure remember the scene where there's a couple in the restaurant, they ask the waitress everything about the chicken, including the name of the chicken, and she has a whole dossier of the chicken because those are the kinds of questions that are being asked every single day by this generation. Here's what we're looking at now. Certainly, the impact of the recession is not over. The cost of food is going to increase. A lot of it has to do with weather conditions around the globe. Local still remains hot. Local has been one of the most misunderstood, powerful segments that we've seen in the supermarket. More people are cooking at home, again, for two reasons. Number one is being able to get what they want, experiment, have fun with food, but also saving money. Also, health and nutrition is not going to go away. It is critical to our success for mankind. We've got to reverse early onset diabetes, heart disease, obesity, all of these factors. So we're seeing all this taking place every day in the supermarket and for food brands as well. Let's talk about local. Local is something that, frankly, has been very confusing to a lot of people. They see the word local, they're not quite sure what it means. They go to a farmer's market, they're assuming that everything is local. Well, I've got a new definition of local. It started out as being within 50 miles, then 100 miles, and then it was within a state, then within a region. Well, the bottom line is what we're seeing in the supermarket is local is now defined as anything that's grown on the planet Earth. And we've gotten carried away with the power of local. It's become just as powerful as new, if not more powerful as new, and people are confused by it. So what I'd like to suggest is we think about bioregions. If you look at this map from USDA, there's certain climates and certain soil and certain water conditions throughout the country that make it easy to grow certain crops. So just growing blueberries, for example, in Iowa might not be as successful as growing it in California or Michigan. So what we really need to think about is what are the parts of the country where it's perfect to grow food. Now you see that center part of the country, a lot of wheat, a lot of corn, a lot of soy. Then off to the left, you see California with the colors designating the diversity of crops that are there. And you take a look at what California can grow and what they are growing. It's much more diverse than any other part of the country. Hence the problem from the California drought that's now affecting about half of all produce and a lot of other elements such as meat, beef, organic beef, and the like throughout the country. So the question is whether or not we're really going to have more of a problem. With El Nino predicted, some suggest that the drought will be over. Others say probably not, because the water is going to come down so hard it's not going to have a chance to absorb. So what happens to agriculture in this country? I've talked to a lot of farmers that have actually moved their farmland from Northern California, renting into places like Georgia. First of all, the water is a lot cheaper, a lot more available, and the price of leasing land, instead of $1,000 an acre, drops down to probably $60 an acre. So we're going to see a lot more movement throughout the country of where different crops are grown, as well as more in Mexico, more in Peru, more in Central and South America. And that opens up the question, and we don't have time to deal with it here, about food safety issues and what kind of controls we'll have over these crops. Here's a new product that I think is going to be gangbusters. Here's the Ultimate in Local. This is a device that costs about $1,200, about the size of a dishwasher, that you install in your kitchen. It's connected to water and power, obviously, and you can actually grow your own food. You can grow arugula and basil and broccoli and so on. And I think we're going to see many more devices like this coming up so that people can be assured of the quality and freshness, and certainly what preservatives are being used, what additives are being used in our foods, and pesticides, of course. Back to nutrition and health. The Dr. Google phenomenon is unbelievable. And what we're seeing now is that Google is the #1 rated source for nutrition information, much more than anybody else, and I'll show you a chart with the actual numbers in a moment. But what we're seeing is the registered dietitian at various supermarkets becoming much more active, helping consumers in the aisles, having newsletters like this, having programs that really can give unbiased facts. Because keep in mind, the supermarket, again, today has 40,000 products, eventually 20,000 products. They want to sell everything. They want to sell the Twinkies as well as the kale. And it's really the registered dietitian that can help people navigate up and down the aisle to know what they should be consuming for themselves and their families. And we see a huge growth in this area. We already have about 600 full-time registered dietitians, one in every ShopRite store, one in every Hy-Vee store, and we see that exploding over the next couple of years to probably 3,000 RDs full-time in supermarkets around the country. When we ask people, and we've got a consumer panel of over 100,000 consumers that we're surveying constantly, are they eating healthier? Yes, absolutely. But it's interesting to know why they're eating healthier. #1 is they want to lose weight. #2, which was a huge surprise for us, they feel that it's more sustainable and better for the environment. And that's really being led by a lot of the millennial generation and Generation Z. The 57% about losing weight is across all demographics. And frankly, the doctor saying lose weight, you want to live longer, is number last on the list. Back to where people get their information, again, that turquoise bar online health websites is the #1. The doctor, #3, and friends or relatives have now moved up to the #2 position. It's also very confusing to go into a supermarket. And it's going to get even more confusing. Keep in mind, new dietary guidelines will come out this fall, probably in about a month and a half from now. And with that, new call-outs, we're going to have added sugars on the label. They've reduced or they've taken away the sodium restriction on it. So we're going to see a lot of headlines on it. We're going to see a lot of consumer confusion. And it's going to be critical for people to understand, for brands to understand how to explain this to consumers. Another thing that's coming under vast scrutiny is front of package labeling. You've seen it, whether it's a score, whether it's a number of stars, whether it's a local hospital that's suggesting certain foods. It's a mess out there. So what we're really going to have to see is we're going to have to see some standardization of this information. And frankly, these companies telling us why they're choosing certain foods. For the most part, it's a closed algorithm. They're not revealing how many grams of fat give a certain score, or how much sodium, or the sustainability of the product. That's going to have to become transparent for consumers to believe in it. The new nutritional facts label presumably will look something like it does on the right, really accentuating the amount of calories, breaking out, as I said, added sugars as part of sugars. And a lot of people are very concerned that people are going to get confused between added sugars, regular sugars, and add them together. I would suggest not, because people said the same thing when saturated fat and trans fat had to be called out. We didn't really see confusion. The question is going to be how certain products, juices, for example, that don't have any sugars added to them, but are very high in sugar, are able to communicate this properly to consumers and not scare away consumers, as sugars become much more important in people's diets. So what should you be watching? Number one, the baby boomers that are aging. They're snacking more. They're moving away from 3 square meals a day to 5, 6, 7 meals a day. One of the categories that we've really seen go through the roof over the past 3 or 4 years as a result of this are the jerky products. Beef jerky, turkey jerky, alligator jerky, just about every jerky that you can imagine. So high protein snacks that are filling and are tasty. We're also seeing smoked everything. The interesting thing about smoking is it's a good basic flavor that you can add to. Unlike sriracha, which obviously has been very hot, but please, no more sriracha products out there. It's a single note flavor. Smoking, you can add a nice base to it and then add sweet or hot or anything else to it. So we're starting to see a lot more smoked products that are really done well by chefs. We're also seeing the rise in fermented foods. Started, again, with Greek yogurt, changing the dairy case, but now we're seeing a lot more fermented foods because people are making that relationship between fermented foods and gut health and being able to balance the good and the bad bacteria. So whether it's kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha beverages, many more fermented foods are on the horizon. We're also seeing more craft foods. And what I mean by this, similar to craft beers, small brands that are really authentic, that don't have to sell nationally in every store, and really create a good following. Now, we're starting to see a little movement on that from the big brands, but transparency is going to be key. Pepsi, for example, with Caleb's Cola, their craft soda, has really done a good job in isolating what that trend is. But frankly, from a transparency standpoint, they haven't done a good job. Nowhere on the package does it say Pepsi. And again, with the millennial generation, they will find out exactly where these products are coming from and who's making them. So it's critical to be as transparent as possible. Generation Z, those people 20 years and under, are the new chefs. And their cadre of products are very different. They love fresh chicken as their number one source. They love hot dogs. They're very different than the millennials who are looking for complex flavors, something new all the time, and as exotic as it can be. So Generation Z are frankly more like the 65-year-old plus generation that we're seeing now, and they're moving back to basics. So what's the future going to look like? Well, I can tell you it's going to be all these things. Mobile, more fresh, more artisan, more expensive, and more delivered. There's no question about any of that. And the future, for me, is going to rest in catering to health and wellness. As I said before, critical for our survival and our prosperity. Creating a wow experience, and that's both with the brand as well as in the supermarket. Being able to walk into a store like a Trader Joe's, for example. Every time I go into Trader Joe's, I want to wear one of those shirts. I want to ring that bell. I never want to leave. Same thing with Wegmans. Different format entirely, but same wow experience. Mariano's in Chicago, same thing, where you'll see people going shopping and having a glass of wine while they're shopping. Making an experience wow is going to be critical. And then celebrating food preparation and taste. The days of piling it high and selling it cheap at the end of an aisle, frankly, that's the past. We now have to celebrate food. We have to have more chefs in store doing demonstrations, preparing samplings. We want a better food experience than we've got now. So I don't know if you've had a chance to visit us at supermarketguru.com. We've been around for 25 plus years online. I invite you to go to supermarketguru.com and also sign up for our newsletter, which is right there. It's a daily newsletter, very simple, but it includes a lot of the information that you need to know. We also produce 5 trend videos per week, one about consumers, one about health and wellness, one about retail innovations. I urge you to watch those and enjoy those, and also 5 new product reviews every week. Each product review is just about 2 minutes or so, and we rate them in an open algorithm, I might add, and you can also see them on our website in the left-hand column where it says videos under product reviews and get a sense of some of the latest products that are about to hit the shelves. This is a picture of my dad and my grandfather's milk truck. And it was my dad who urged me to understand what the supermarket was all about. The supermarket was my laboratory, that I could go up to consumers, tap people on the shoulder, and say, why did you buy this? Why did you buy that? And I urge you to do the same thing. Get out behind your desk. Get into supermarkets. Get into dollar stores. Get into every food channel that you can and observe what's going on the shelves and with consumers. I think there's 3 questions that you should be asking yourself. Number 1, what's the next big trend? And keep focused on that. When you discover what that is, move to the next and the next. We've got to train ourselves to constantly be in front of that consumer. What are the 3 things you'd like to know about food consumers that you don't know today? And find out, whether it's by going into a store, tapping people on the shoulder, or getting some syndicated research, or listening to the Lempert report. Any of those are critical for your success. What's the innovation that you've noticed over the past year? Excuse me. That's not food related, that's the most interesting, that we can learn from and bring into the food world. So some final thoughts, and then we'll open it up to your questions. Number 1, consumers want more information about foods, and they will find it. They will find out the information whether or not you want them to, whether or not you've directed it. So be upfront, be transparent. Let everybody know what you're doing. And in fact, we've seen a lot of changes in the food world where, whether it's cleaning up ingredients, even food service operators like Chick-fil-A, very successful chain, who decided about a year ago that it was time to clean up their ingredients, that they were listening to their consumers. So we're going to see more and more of that. Transparency is key. Consumers are bored with food. They're looking for more adventure. They're looking for more recipe ideas. They want more different flavors, so let's not forget that. The food world, both retail and food service, is in flux. No question about that. Lots of changes happening, whether it's in New York City, whether it's in the Midwest. We're going to see a lot more new retailers out there. We're looking at the drug chains, which we haven't even had an opportunity to talk about. But the drugstores, whether it's Walgreens, Duane Reade, or CVS, are building their new stores that are 50% food. They're the new corner grocer. They're frankly going to put a lot of the bodegas in New York out of business. So it's important that we understand what these changes are and to understand and be empowered by them. Focus on the relationships. The relationship between brand and retailer, relationship with the consumer, relationship with farmers, that's all you got. At the end of the day, somebody will always build a store that's nicer or cheaper. Somebody will knock off your brand to be cheaper and better. So it's your relationship with the consumer and with that retailer that really is going to survive. And also, as these stores get downsized, your relationship with the retailer is even more critical. And think beyond loyalty to advocacy. It's not how many times somebody buys your product, it's how many times somebody tells somebody else about your product. Word of mouth, friends and family is more important than ever before. So I want to end with a challenge, and then we'll take some questions. The challenge is simply this, and I've taken it, and I hope you'll join me as well, is to make the food world, both retail and packaged goods, better than when I first joined it. And I hope that you'll join me in doing that as well. I want to thank the folks at Brand Square for allowing me to share with my ideas, and let's head and answer some questions. So Chris asks how to sell certain brand of water more and better way into supermarkets across the U.S. Well, Chris, a couple things when we look at water. The water business has changed dramatically. Certainly Evian changed it initially, then Fiji has changed it even further. A lot of it has to do with what are the attributes of water. Vitamin water had a whole different way of thinking, adding, frankly, water-soluble vitamins to water, upping the price. But their success was really having 5,000 brand ambassadors out there, giving samples of the water, talking to people one-on-one. It's tough to get a new brand of bottled water in the supermarket, especially as we're seeing the soda aisle diminish, less people going there. The opportunity for bottled water is big, but you've got to give that retailer and the consumer a reason. It's got to be more than a pretty package. One of the things that we're seeing is a lot more beverages, for example, and coconut water has certainly changed the business, but a lot more waters having ingredients like aloe coming in. So I think that the future is going to be enriching the water with something else that does have a health benefit to it or a flavor benefit, but not just, artificial flavor or just adding even natural flavor to a product. It's got to stand for something. It's certainly, in my opinion, can't come from a municipal source. It has to come from a natural source in some way, shape, or form. And then it's all about the branding. But I think the water really has to have more substance than it did, probably 10, 15 years ago to get on the shelves. What do you think the impact of Aldi and Lidl will be on traditional supermarkets? Stephanie asks that. They're going to put supermarkets out of business. I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of Aldi. They've got 1,300 stores now, as I mentioned, 4,000 more on the way. This is a store, for those of you who have not been in it, they're very bare basics. You've got to buy shopping bags if you want them. And again, in California, we've had to do that for a while, but this is the rest of the country. If you want a shopping cart, you've got to put a quarter in as a deposit for the shopping cart. Bare bones, and probably the most interesting thing about Aldi is 90% of what they sell is their own brand. Now, their own brand is phenomenal. Great quality. It's won awards globally for taste, for quality. Their chocolates keep on winning awards. And you're going to save a substantial amount of money. One example I'll give you is this week's circular for Aldi shows wild salmon fillets at about $4.69 a pound. Comes in a 20-ounce package, so you've got to bring it down to 16 ounces. You compare that with the price in a traditional supermarket, and Vons, for example, I looked up their number this week. On sale, it's $7.99 a pound for farm-raised salmon. So, you're seeing huge differences in prices, 20, 30, 40, 50%. And I think that this this format is going to appeal terrifically and right on the mark to millennials who care about the quality of food, who don't have money, who, again, don't have that old brick and mortar experience that their parents had. So I think that they're going to be hugely successful. I think we're going to see wars between Aldi and Lidl. And bottom line is, for us, I think that's really kind of cool as consumers. Juliet is asking, with Amazon Fresh on the horizon, currently in areas of Seattle, California, and New York, what impact do you think they'll have on the U.S. grocery industry? Currently, less than 1% of grocery sales in the U.S. are done online. And are there any predictions on how quickly U.S. consumers will adopt to this way of shopping for groceries? Great question, Julia. As I said before, I'm looking at Amazon carefully. I'm looking at Instacart. Instacart is even more interesting to me, as well as the grandfather Peapod who are out there. Online shopping, as you pointed out, has not really taken hold the way everybody expected. The new hybrid, where you're going online and ordering it and picking it up at the supermarket, is moving dramatically. Again, there's probably about, to take a guess, 2,000 supermarkets around the country that are doing that now, and it's become hugely successful. It's almost like the Instacart model, where you've got people who are trained, and the Peapod model, people who are trained to take the products off the shelf and then, have it ready for you for delivery. For Amazon Fresh to continue their success, not only will they have to roll out, but they're going to have to make deliveries faster. The question is what geographies they can do that in. If you look at Fresh Direct in New York, which has been very successful, their key is never moving the truck. Getting those trucks packed up in Long Island City, getting through the Midtown Tunnel before traffic begins, parking it in Manhattan, and then leaving it and having people work out of the truck for the rest of the day. I'm not sure that model works everywhere, but frankly, I'd like to see Instacart growing. I'd also like to see some competition for Instacart. But I think that Amazon Fresh is going to be more hurt by Instacart than anyone else. But I think they'll still do good. I mean, what concerns me about Amazon delivery is all the hype about drones, and I'm not sure that they're going to be able to pull that off. What I do see as a unique opportunity for all these locations are driverless cars making deliveries. So, for example, from the commissary or from the store, you've got this driverless vehicle that has maybe 10 compartments in it. Each compartment has a freezer, has a refrigerator, and has dry grocery area. And basically, I order online. When I order online, it gives me a combination. The driverless car, shows up. I get a pop-up similar as I do for Uber that it's arriving now. Go out to it, put in my combination, take out my groceries in the totes. I think that's what we're going to see as the future, versus Amazon Fresh having one truck, that's loaded that has to go from destination to destination. Chris asks, why is there still no percentage in the new labeling format? Chris, I'm not sure what you mean by that. So, in fact, let me go back to that slide and show you what the new format is going to look like. So what we are seeing, is the percent of daily value, certainly for all those attributes, and the percent of vitamins. So I'm not sure what you mean by no percentage in the new labeling format. So if you want to clarify that, just explain a little bit more, happy to answer it. I'm also being told that we only have about another couple minutes. So if there's any questions that come in after this session, happy to answer them. Just post them up, and I'll be happy to answer them individually. Again, my thanks to Brand Square, to all of you for joining us today. Again, hope you sign up. Go to supermarketguru.com, sign up for our newsletter. And again, let's make the food world a better place than it is today. Thanks so much.